Hey everyone, it's Jenna Redfield, and today I'm going to be talking about 13 different tips to help with your focus when it comes to ADHD, whether it's a concept or a app or a tool or even just a strategy. We're going to be talking about all of that today, so let's get started. So the first thing that is really important for me when I'm working on anything is being able to find the things that I'm looking for. There's nothing that distracts me more than trying to track something down, whether it's a project or I'm doing making food or the recipe. And then all of a sudden I'm on Pinterest and then I'm on YouTube. Like I can get very easily distracted and not focused when I am looking for something. So there's a couple things I use. Obviously, Google Photos, Google Drive, and Notion are the three main tools I use to gather a lot of my information so that I can quickly find what I'm looking for. When it comes to Google Photos, I think that's an amazing part when I'm looking for like a photo for something or a video. It has the ability to actually search the app if you just type in a word. So if I typed in red house, I could find all of the images of red houses. Or if I typed in kitten or cat, I would find all the pictures I've ever uploaded into Google Photos of a cat. So it's very, very easy for me to quickly find what I'm looking for and not waste any more time out of focus. The other thing that I think I struggle with a lot is being distracted by different apps, whether it's social media or even YouTube and Netflix. So I like to use an app on my computer called OneFocus that actually blocks me from being able to access apps for a certain amount of time. You add a bunch of websites to your blocked list and then you can set the timer. I usually do about 30 to 45 minutes just because after that time I usually reward myself with being able to look at Facebook, or sometimes I have to for work since I do a lot of social media stuff. So OneFocus on the computer. Also, if you have an iPhone or I think even an Android, they have options where you can block certain apps. It's pretty easy to get around it, so I don't always use those, but you can also track how long you're on certain apps, which mine is a little excessive. All right, number 3. This is a really important one that specifically works mostly with people with ADHD, and that's the concept of body doubling. Now, you might be thinking, what the heck is that? So I found out about this last year, where if you're in a room by yourself, it's actually a lot harder to work. You need the bouncing off effect of sitting with somebody else to actually keep you focused. This is why I tend to be a lot more productive if I go to the library or a co-working space or even just a coffee shop. I don't know why, but I tend to just be a lot more focused. It's like it grounds me to be able to sit and actually work. So if you work by yourself in a room, you might be realizing that that is not the best place to work for you. So if you are working from home because of COVID, maybe think about going to a local place, maybe even outside, at a restaurant or something, and be around people, because that way you are able to focus better. Let me know in the comments if that helps you, because it definitely helps me. All right, so one thing that I have tried for years to do is to use paper planners. I have bought bullet journals, I've bought planners, I have wall calendars. I have tried to use paper products for my calendar, and I have just realized that they do not work for me personally. I do sometimes have so many things in my head, I just have to write them all down. But when it comes to actually tracking and planning, I would say that I do much better with the electronic system, mainly because of alerts and notifications. With my planner, I forget to look at it. It's just hard for me to actually use it. So for me, I really have focused on Notion as my planning tool and Google Calendar as my alert system. I also use August Bradley's system of action items and task lists. So I've mentioned him before on this YouTube channel, so make sure to go check out his YouTube channel if you're like, what the heck are you talking about? He has an actual system of productivity that is, to me, probably the best one I found. And I've actually seen a lot of people in the comments with ADHD talk about how his system has actually helped them a lot, because it's systems thinking, which is kind of similar to how I think ADHD brains work. It's hard for us sometimes to prioritize or even just kind of separate things. Everything's all kind of together. So I highly recommend checking out August Bradley's PPV system because it's a really awesome one. So that's what I use to kind of track my tasks and, know what my goals are, because those are all things I struggle with. All right, I kind of mentioned this with the last one, but having alarms, notifications, and alerts is really important. When it comes to notifications, also make sure to turn off the ones that are annoying, that don't matter. So I like to, every couple months, go through if I've downloaded a new app and I'm getting a lot of notifications on my phone, which again are distracting, go in, turn all those off and only keep the ones that are important to you. But alarms are also great. I recently got my Amazon Echo Dot, which I have synced to my Google Calendar, so it actually tells me out loud when I have an event on my calendar. So this is helpful if I am in hyperfocus and trying to get something done, and there's an important meeting I have, and I don't want to miss it. I make sure that 10 minutes before my Amazon Echo Dot tells me that is happening. So you can set that up very easily if you have an Alexa or Google Home or whatever you have, and you have a phone, you're able to sync your Google or iCal. So that's a really, really helpful one. I only found that out the last several months, and it's been really game changing. So something that I recently discovered that I really enjoy, and it actually helps me stay on track when it comes to focus, is tracking how far along I am in the process, having an actual accomplishment date or even just a percentage. So for example, I like to track the TV shows that I watch and the books that I read. Also, there's a lot of ways you can do this, whether it's a project that you're doing, and you can actually do that on Notion. You can have like percentages. It's kind of hard to tell like what percentage done you are of a project because you don't know how many things you have to do. But for me, reading a book, one of the things that I always struggled with was I'd always forget what page I was on. I didn't know how far I was. So now every time I read, every like 20 minutes or so, I update my Goodreads to see where I am in the book. It keeps me motivated to show not only myself, but the people that are following my Goodreads account to be like, oh, she's reading this book and she's, updating it. So for me, it also helps me know where I am. It shows me, oh my gosh, look how far I am. I'm over halfway done with the book. I can actually finish this. Being able to finish tasks is something that I've struggled with my whole life. I've never been able to finish a lot of, books or movies or TV shows. I just kind of get bored and lose focus on it. So being able to track that and then motivate me to be like, hey, look, I'm so close to being done. Let's just do it. So I have read more books in the last several months than I have in the last several years because of this system. And for me, reading is so important. I think reading books can actually help you focus more than you'd think because it trains your brain to actually be thinking and not being distracted like we are on emails. So I think reading actually helps your brain and memory overall. So if you haven't read a book, I know a lot of people with ADHD struggle with it, but you can get into hyperfocus. So that's something that I find I can do. Go outside. I like to read outside, like on a hammock or in a chair, because it's the best place for me to read. It's free distractions and it's really calming. All right, so number 7 is moving around places every day when you're working. Now, I have an office here and I'm in here a lot. I mean, I have an office for a reason, but I will say I don't use this every single day. Why? Because I tend to find that if I'm in the same place, I can get really easily distracted, bored, and unable to focus. So what I do is I try to change up my location, whether it's the dining room table, a couch, sitting outside, going to a coffee shop. I try to change up where I work almost every day. I try to be here at least a couple times a week, but it's something that I use this mostly as a studio to film and record. But when it comes to actually using it as an office, sometimes I don't always do that. And I know that sounds really weird, but that's just how my brain works. Also, don't work in your bedroom. This is something that I learned. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about the book Where, I think it's When You Sleep or How You Sleep or something. And basically they were talking about don't do any work in your bedroom where you are actually going to be sleeping because it can confuse your brain. So I've been trying to avoid doing that. I do sometimes like to work in my bed because it's comfy, but I've really been trying not to do that because I know it affects my sleep. Also, sleep is really important for focus. Okay, so number 8 is one that I think is very interesting, and it's just something that I've kind of noticed is I like to start my day with more of a monotonous thing, and then you get kind of bored with it, but you're kind of in the zone and then moving into creative endeavors. So if you start your day creative, I don't know why, but it kind of makes me a little bit more anxious. I kind of like the monotony of almost like data entry or something in the morning and then moving into creative stuff later in the afternoon. I was listening to a podcast called the Hacking Your ADHD podcast. It's a really good podcast, one of my favorites. And what they talk about in one of the latest episodes is the idea of sequencing, which is the order of events that you do things in. And I thought that was super interesting because you're able to kind of have routines, habits kind of set up for yourself. If you haven't read Atomic Habits, highly recommend that book. It really has changed my life. All right, number 9 is actually using your calendar. So whether this is time blocking or using the Pomodoro method, looking at the hourly of what you're actually doing in a day is really helpful to actually getting more things done. So I really struggle with this. I'm saying to do this, but I still struggle with it. I've tried time blocking. I've tried tried doing some of these, but for me, it all comes back down to the idea of planning. And planning is a hard thing for a lot of people with ADHD, including myself. I know what I need to get done, but sometimes I don't always know the steps or when I should do them. So figuring out what works for you and maybe writing it down on a calendar, putting it in your, Google Calendar, blocking it out, saying from this hour to this hour, I'm doing this. This is when I take a break. Kind of tracking that kind of helps you see where you get stuck and what maybe is the trigger for being able to not focus. All right, number 10, this is an important thing, is figure out how you get into hyperfocus, because hyperfocus is the opposite of what a lot of ADHD people struggle with. And so it's almost like we either can't focus at all or we're hyperfocused. It's not like one or the other, like we can't be in the middle. It's like one or the other. And I found that I can get into hyperfocus, and one of the best ways for me was video editing. I didn't realize that was what was happening, but growing up, I loved video editing because it just felt like the time was just flying by and I didn't even realize it. And it was because I was so hyper-focused. When you edit something, you have to be so focused. You have to usually put headphones on so you're like focused on the sound and the visual, and it's very hard to be distracted while you're video editing because you have to be so focused. And I really enjoyed that because it was the first time in my life I felt like I actually could pay attention to something for a very long time and the time would speed by. So whatever it is that keeps you or gets you into hyperfocus, start to pay attention to that and figure out, okay, how can I do this more often? Because that's really what's going to make you more productive. So I kind of mentioned the idea of headphones. That's another thing to think about, is the music and sound that's happening behind you while you are focusing. So there's a couple of different websites, I'm going to link them below, where you can get, people talking in the background, like at a coffee shop. Also having white noise or binaural beats is really helpful. I was also watching a video where someone used a metronome to have like a background sound, like a ticking. I thought that was super interesting. Growing up, I always had a very loud clock in my room, and everyone was always like, how do you sleep with that? And I was like, I don't know, I just like the sound. And now I'm realizing that might be an ADHD thing where we kind of can tune it out, or it actually helps us stay focused and on track, having kind of a ticking noise in the background. I thought that was very interesting. All right, number 12. One of the things I try to do sometimes if I'm feeling really distracted is to delete apps off my phone or, hide them somehow. I've done this with Twitter. I've done this with Instagram. I've done this with TikTok. I've done this with YouTube. I've done this with Netflix, where I just delete it, because really sometimes it's a lot of that just like instant, shift to like click, click, click from your phone. And everyone does it. And not just ADHD people. If you're bored, you're standing, waiting at the store, you go on your phone, right? And so it's kind of become this twitch in our brains to be like, I gotta go on my phone. So deleting those apps kind of like reminds you, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to go on there right now. I'm just being distracted. Same with blocking, again, on your computer. It kind of like, sometimes I just click Facebook because that's just like one of my, trigger points, and then it will block it. I'm like, great, I don't need to be on Facebook right now. Now, the last one is deciding how you want to use, whether it's medication or supplements. I am not going to give you any advice. I am not a medical doctor, but sometimes there are certain things, whether it's your food or your exercise. I like to take a daily walk to kind of focus myself. I just took one this morning, like right before I'm filming this video, and I'm kind of sweaty. I'm like, this is probably not a good idea. But I like doing my walks earlier in the day because then I can kind of focus afterwards. Working out really helps you focus. Eating right, I'm trying to eat a lot healthier smoothies with a lot of, protein and fats, healthy fats. I'm trying to eat more vegetables, and it's just something that, that really impacts your focus because it impacts your brain. And then also if there are supplements, whether it is caffeine, I'm not a big caffeine drinker. So that is something that I found that ADHD people actually have kind of the opposite effect. It actually calms them down. Or maybe it's CBD, whatever it is that you use, whether it's medication that's prescribed by your doctor or maybe some sort of pill. There's a bunch of different ones that are supposed to help with focus. I think there's one called True Focus that I've used before. So there's a bunch of different supplements and medications that you might want to look into as well. So those are my 13 tips. I hope that maybe one of these you found. I'm going to make sure to leave all of the links below because I find I think that's helpful when I randomly mention things and want to share them with you. So make sure to subscribe to this channel. Let me know if you want more ADHD content. I am trying to focus specifically on productivity, Notion, maybe a little bit on ADHD, and just really being the best person you can be. I'm really into self-improvement, and I think that's something that a lot of people are as well. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.